Alrighty, so today we're going to do the season preview of Real Salt Lake, and at the time of this recording, which is on a Monday on February 12th, they've just recently made a signing, and it seems like this is a signing that, as much as a lot of RSL fans are hoping for a replacement for Jefferson Savarino, and in terms of the number 10 spot, this signing kind of maybe fits that role, and we'll definitely get to talk about who it is. But in terms of last season, they finished with a 14-8-12 record and finished with 50 points. They made the playoffs again, but obviously, I think a lot of RSL fans are a little disappointed that they once again got bounced in the first round. I mean, this has kind of also been the problem for RSL, and I feel like they kind of share the same problem with a couple of teams that are kind of good enough to make it to the playoffs, but not good enough to compete. And I've even mentioned many times that's just as bad of a feeling as a team that doesn't make it to the playoffs or just have a legacy of failure of basically not doing too much in the playoffs or fail to get past the second round. Though I can't really say the same thing about this RSL team because they did make that miraculous run in 2021. Which, speaking of which, despite the fact that they made the playoffs in 2023, the last time they won a playoff game was back in 2021, and they won a couple of them too, all making it all the way to the Western Conference Final before falling to the Portland Timbers. But that being said, in terms of MLS Cup, they've also won one of them. 2009 was the last time they won MLS Cup, and despite the fact that they have reached another MLS Cup, most recently 2013, that's pretty much the closest that they came besides what we saw the miracle run that they did in 2021. And by the way, back in the early days of Real Salt Lake, they were a really good team. I mean, when you had the likes of Kyle Beckman, Nick Romaldo, too, legend in this RSL team on that team, and a bunch of also some awesome players on that team as well. It's no surprise that they were a dominant force from the get go. And speaking of players that are legendary to this RSL team this offseason, as I mentioned before, they no longer have Jefferson Savarino and Damir Kreliach. In fact, Damir Kreliach instantly made impact for the Vancouver Whitecaps as he already scored a goal for the Whitecaps, and the only goal that was scored the Whitecaps had in that 1-1 draw against Tigres. And again, I've said this before and I say it again, it is very strange seeing Damir Kreliach wearing a Vancouver Whitecaps jersey and not a Real Salt Lake jersey. It's all kind of also very similar to when I see Albert Rusnag in his first season with Seattle, and how it's kind of weird seeing him in Rave Green instead of the claret and Kobo. But I think it's even more weird considering the fact that Damir Kreliak is just such a legend for the team. And while RSL fans are happy that he made an impact for another MLS team, I think it's kind of bittersweet to say that they wish they could have kept him on, or at least they wish that that was probably the final club he's gonna play, or at least the final MLS club that he was going to play before he retired and rides off the sunset. But that being said, remember earlier I talked about how they just recently signed a player and that kind of fixed the number 10 issue that they had? Well, they got this guy called Matt Crooks from Middlesbrough. Now, again, as I mentioned about him in the News of the Week episode, I have no idea how good he is, but at least from what I heard from Middlesbrough fans, they said that he's a relatively good player. Now, he in terms of the number that he has, he doesn't really have the number to prove to be a perfect replacement for Jefferson Savarino. And again, I do feel like this is more kind of for a depth signing rather than for them to get a DP number 10. But that's going to be one thing that they'll definitely be looking for. And as I said with the season preview of the Portland Timbers, because I'm pre-recording this, they might have already signed a DP player by the time this video drops on Thursday. But they also signed a left back in Alexandru Petrinas. In fact, this is really the first real signing that they did this offseason. It's been a relatively quiet offseason in terms of signing for Real Salt Lake. Besides that, they got Fidel Barajas, and then they got a couple players from the draft in Kevin Bonilla and Matthew Bell. They also got Kevon Lambert and Sebastian Jeffrey. But in terms of players that no longer of this team, yeah, it's the Savarino. So again, throughout this offseason, there was a debate. Is he going to leave? Is he going to stay? Well, it looks like he is leaving the club for the second in time. And the same goes for Jasper Loffelson. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think this was a big mistake of letting go Jasper Loffelson, especially last season where he really anchored that fullback spot, and that I was really surprised that they decided to let him go, especially on a cheap too. I think he's going to do very well with the Colorado Rapids, and mind you, I might even say that could be one of the biggest steal in terms of this off season, getting such a good young player that could definitely be an MLS caliber fullbacks in this league. They also don't have Johnny Mendez anymore, and as I mentioned about Damir Kreliach now with the Vancouver Whitecaps, but they also finally solved the solution with Danny Muswowski. So for a long time, last season, Danny Muswowski had a bit of a holdout period because the contract issue was a big problem between him and RSL, and he was not happy with RSL with not getting a new contract. So yeah, he went through a holdout. It didn't quite work to a point where they decided to cut him, and now he's a new player with the Seattle Sounders. Now another player that is no longer with this team is Rubin, who of course went to Querétaro, and this was kind of early in the off season when they let him go. Other notable players no longer in this team: Juro Orzoko, Elijah Paul, Elaine Pierre, Scott Caldwell, who actually retired just recently. I actually forgot to mention that Scott Caldwell actually called it a career couple of days ago in the News of the Week episode. I mean, what a career that Caldwell has had, and that a very underrated career too. I don't think a lot of people appreciate how good of a player he is, especially with the New England Revolution. But yeah, he just recently retired a couple of days ago, and then the last player that's no longer on this team is Julio Benitez. Now, looking at the preseason schedule, so they've been playing a couple of Scandinavian teams. They lost 2-1 against Bromby in their first preseason game before on February 6th. They won 1-0 against Fredrikstad, I think that's how you pronounce. And then they won 3-0 against Klopsvik. Again, apologies if I'm absolutely butchering the Scandinavian team. But they do get to play against MLS opponent in preseason soon, starting with them playing against the Columbus Crew on Valentine's Day. And they also will be playing against Toronto FC on Valentine's Day as well. I'm assuming it's probably a split squad kind of action because they're basically playing two MLS team on the same day. Like you usually don't see like an MLS team basically play two games in the same day, unless if it's a split squad action. Especially, don't be surprised even some of those players from Real Monarchs in the MLS Next Pro might be, even get action in one, if not both of these games. Now, looking at the first 10 game of the season. So as I mentioned about Inter Miami in terms of their season preview, they get the honor of being the team to kick off the regular season, and the team that they're going to be facing, it's against Real Salt Lake. And in some way, this maybe gives the advantage for RSL because, Miami are playing their final preseason game against New Old Boys, and they're just absolutely battered after this world tour that they have. And I've said this before about the world tour of how, well, it's definitely a success when you look at the financial point of view and the commercial point of view. It was an epic failure in terms of actually getting to see the performance of the team, and that throughout the world tour you can see that this Inter Miami team, I mean, for those people that said that team could be a contender, yeah, maybe they need to look at how bad the defense was, because that defense for Inter Miami, of course, was pretty bad. But obviously, we're not going to talk too much about Inter Miami because this is a Real Salt Lake season preview, not an Inter Miami season preview. Already done that already. But they, of course, will play against RSL, and I expect RSL could have the upper edge in that one, consider they'll be already facing a very tired Inter Miami team in the beginning of this season. But then they go on the road again to play against St. Louis City, and then in their first game, they're going to be playing against LAFC for their season opener. I feel like this is the second time I've seen them play against LAFC in their season opener, because I remember they play against them in the season opener not long ago, probably since if I remember 2018 when LAFC came to the league. They played RSL in the season opener, and yeah, it did not go so well for RSL in that game. But after that, they get the Rocky Mountain Cup against Colorado. So the Rocky Mountain Cup is very early this season on March 9th before they go on the road to play against Vancouver, and then they immediately finish the season series with St. Louis. So that's another team that they play relatively early and finish the series. Not even before we hit into spring break. But on April 6th, they go on the road to play against Minnesota. Then they get to play against the defending MLS Cup champion, that is the Columbus Crew. Then they go on the road to play against the Chicago Fire before going on the road to play against the Philadelphia Union. So they're going to be playing fair amount of Eastern Conference team. It's kind of similar to what we see with the Union, where they're going to play like six straight games against Western Conference opponent, and that's pretty much the only six Western Conference opponent they face. It's almost like they're kind of tired of facing Western Conference teams, so they just say, yeah, let's play all of them in the early season, get this over with, so we can play against teams that is within our conference. That being said, after the League Cup is over, the first opponent that RSL will be playing is the San Jose Earthquakes at home before they play at home against the New England Revolution. And then they play against probably their most hated opponent from last season, besides the Colorado Rapids, that is Houston Dynamo. Well, actually, I wouldn't even say the Colorado Rapids, probably maybe Sporting KC itself, because RSL and Sporting KC tends to have a bit of a history in terms of being a rival compared to the Colorado Rapids. And this is not to discount the Rocky Mountain Cup, but yeah, RSL and Sporting KC, when it's competitive, it is competitive. But if there's one rivalry that, especially from last season, that RSL fans does not want to see, or at least want to see them finally winning in this rivalry and get themselves some revenge, is against the Houston Dynamo, because they pretty much was owned by the Houston Dynamo last season, both in league play, in the playoffs, and also in U.S. Open Cup play as well. But in September 18th, they play against FC Dallas before playing at home against the Portland Timbers. Then they go on the road to play against Austin before returning home to play against Minnesota. Then they go on the road to play against the San Jose Earthquakes. And then the final game of the season for them on decision day is against the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, looking at the strength of this team, it's got to be the midfield of this team. This team has a really good midfield, and especially the other good news for this RSL team, Pablo Ruiz should be back in this team. And I think from what I heard, a lot of RSL fans, they've said that Pablo Ruiz basically hold the glue to the team, and as soon as he went down with that season-ending injury, this team basically collapsed. I mean, that midfield completely collapsed, and the defense was completely exposed, and that they're hoping that with him returning the present, the RSL team can be back to what they're supposed to be, a team that was competitive in terms of competing for the Western Conference crown. I mean, it's hard to believe that last season this RSL team has expectation and at times looked like a team that could be a dark horse or making a deep run, just like what we saw in 2021. But again, the Pablo Ruiz injury just completely crippled that team, and they're probably very happy to see him back on this team, but also the young talent on this team. Some of these players that's been been on this team for a while, especially coming from the academy, aren't young anymore. I mean, guys like Justin Glad and even Andrew Brody, that's been with the RSL Academy and transitioned into the main team. They're not really that young anymore, but still some good young talent in this team that will really guide this team to success. And let's also not forget to mention about Diego Luna too. I mean, Diego Luna, this is a kid that I'm gonna be really keeping an eye on, because this kid did some really good thing for this RSL team in the postseason. And don't be surprised if he could have a breakout year. He could be in contention, or maybe even winning the young player of the year heading into next season. Now, obviously, the weakness of this team, finding a Jefferson Savarino replacement. Again, they need a number 10 in this, especially a DP number 10. And again, because this is pre-recorded, they might have already done it by the time I upload this on Thursday. But also, I think it's just a lack of true goal scorer besides Chicho Rongo. So we know Chicho Rongo is a guy that can score every single game, though weirdly, he was kind of left out of the roster as the season goes along. I don't know if there is a relationship problem between him and Pablo Mastroeni's that kind of relegate him to bench duty, but the lack of a true goal scorer, and really the lack of attacking talent. I mean, on paper, you look at this team. This team always had that DNA of the team is the start, and that they don't really kind of believe that they will just have one true player or two true players that can be a difference maker on this team. But in the reality of now, where you see a lot of these teams that go deep into the playoffs or even win MLS Cup that have multiple weapon on the attack, it feels like as much as I know RSL will always stick with the motive of the team is to start. they really, if they want to get to that next level of being a team that can compete for MLS Cup, they need a real star player. And again, Chicharango could be that guy, but I feel like they need another one. And this is also where that number 10 spot and that DP number 10 is huge for them. If he can produce and also be just as good as what Jefferson Savarino was with this team can easily be a contender in the Western Conference and can even easily get to the top four of the Western Conference standing by the end of the season. But as of now, they don't have that number 10 at the time of this recording, and really the only guy that I would say legitimately scares opponent on the attack is Chicho Arango. Now, expectation for this team, again, playoffs, and hope that they have a similar run in 2021. Again, this is a team that for a long time, this is a team that always good enough to make it to the playoffs, but not good enough to compete, and that's kind of frustrates RSL fans a lot. And this is why that 2021 run was so special because they kind of finally broke out that cycle and started to go deep into the playoffs. But it just feels like the pieces are there for them to make it to the playoffs. But this is where I again go back to that number 10 spot and how this could be the difference between them making the playoffs and go on a deep run to them maybe making the playoffs, but it's just going to be like what we've seen before with RSL, a team that good enough to make it to the playoffs. They're probably going to be flamed out in the first round or even in the second round. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at Real Salt Lake in the season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and if you're an RSL fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, and expectation is for this team upcoming season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.